Today I'm sharing a special cake for Valentine's Day. It's easy to make because you just do it in one bowl, and because we're going to use whole wheat flour, it's good for you and your Valentine too. Hi sweet friends, my name is Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest. This channel is all about living the simple life by cooking from scratch, making home remedies, and creating a cozy home with charming thrift store finds. So if you like the simple life like I do, subscribe to my channel and click on the notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now, as I said in the intro, this couldn't be easier. We literally are going to throw everything in one bowl, beat it up, pour it in the pans, and put it in the oven. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Now what I've got here in my bowl is 2 2/3 cup of whole wheat flour. Now I'm using whole wheat pastry flour. You don't need to though if you can't find it. Whole wheat flour will work just fine. And then over here, I've got a cup of cocoa powder. And I like to use now, I wanted to mention the whole wheat flour is organic and the cocoa powder is also organic. And I really like the Rapunzel brand. If you can't find it at your grocery store, I'll put a link in the description below where you can find it because it's a beautiful cocoa powder and it's organic. Now to the whole wheat flour and the cocoa powder, you're going to want to add 1½ cups of sugar. This is the raw sugar, the dried cane juice. You might see it labeled like that at your grocery store. You might also see it under the name brands of like Sucanat or Rapadura, something like that. And this is nice because it still has all the minerals and vitamins in it. The molasses is still in it, and so there's some nutrition to that. Now we're going to add a teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm using sea salt, but any salt will do just fine. And I'm also going to add in a teaspoon of espresso powder. This really helps boost the flavor of the chocolate, but if you don't want to do that, you can leave it out. And next we're going to put in 1 stick of butter. This is 1/2 cup or 8 tablespoons. And here I've got 1/4 cup of leaf lard. Now lard and chocolate go together amazingly. Trust me on this. But if you don't have leaf lard, don't worry about it. It's the lard that comes from the pig that's usually used in baking. But you can also use just plain lard as well. And if you don't want to use any lard at all, but I highly suggest you do, you can just put in 1/4 cup more of butter. And next, we're going to add in 3 eggs, and I'm going to crack one at a time into a bowl and then transfer it into my big bowl here, just to make sure I don't get any shells in there. And in go the 3 eggs, no shells. And now I'm going to add in a cup of buttermilk. Now, if you don't have buttermilk, don't worry. You can use some yogurt thinned with milk to give it the consistency of buttermilk. You could also use kefir. And if you don't have any kefir, milk kefir, not water kefir, milk kefir. And if you don't have any of that, you can just take regular milk, add in a little lemon juice, leave it on the counter to sour, and then you can go ahead and just use that. And you're going to need 1½ cups. And last but not least, you want 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now before you get ready to whip all this up, you want to make sure that you've got 3 cake pans ready. And these are 9-inch cake pans. And all I've done is grease the entire pan. I've put a piece of parchment on the bottom. What I do is I just turn it upside down, I trace with a pencil, and then I cut inside the pencil mark and put that right in on top of the greased pan. This way the parchment paper comes out easy and it also sticks in well. Then I grease the top of the parchment paper and then I flour the whole thing. Now we're going to ice this cake, which I'll talk about the icing in a minute. But so I've just dusted it with white flour. If for any reason you were making this and weren't going to ice it and just put something between the layers, then you could dust it with cocoa powder. But since we're going to ice it, I've just dusted my pans with white flour. Now I've got my electric hand mixer. You can certainly use one of those large stand mixers with the beater attachment if you have that as well. Either will work fine. You could even hand beat it. It might take you a little longer, but it'd be a good exercise. Now we're going to start this on low for about 30 seconds to help everything become incorporated. Then we're going to turn our beater speed up to high and we're going to beat this for 3 minutes. Well, my timer just went off, so that's 3 minutes and the batter's looking great. And I just wanted to mention that as you're beating it on high for the 3 minutes, about halfway through, just stop, scrape down the bowl, make sure everything's incorporated. And there's one thing I want to mention about baking with whole wheat flour. Whether you're using the whole wheat pastry flour or regular whole wheat flour, or even the white whole wheat flour, which is actually whole wheat. It's just a variety of the red whole wheat flour, which is normally labeled whole wheat flour at the grocery store. It can get a little confusing. But regardless of what type of whole wheat flour that you're using, you may find there's going to be a little variation in your batter, because certain whole wheats may absorb liquid a little differently than others and whatnot. So you may, when you go to beat this, notice that it's perfect, or in terms of what you traditionally expect to see in a cake batter, or it's a little thick. If it's a little thick, don't worry. You can add up to an extra half cup of the liquid that you're using, the buttermilk, the thin yogurt, the kefir, the soured milk, whatever the case may be. And then what you want to make sure of is that you have a batter that pretty much looks like this. See, it just sort of falls in ribbons from the beater. That's the consistency of the cake mix that you're looking for. Now what I'm going to do is divide this batter up into each of my 3 cake pans. Now if you want to take the real easy peasy route, you can go ahead and just pour this into a 9 by 13 baking pan and pop that in the oven. It'll take a little longer to bake, upwards of about 50 minutes, as opposed to these in these individual cake pans is going to take us about 30 to 35 minutes. Well, I think I've got these evenly divided amongst these 3 cake pans, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in my preheated 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. We'll check them with a toothpick at that point and see if they're done. If not, we'll let them go for another 5 minutes, about 35 minutes total. And as I said, as I said earlier, if you wanted to and put it in a 9 by 13 baking pan, you'll just want to leave that in the oven for about 50 minutes. And you could check it at about 45 minutes or so with a toothpick and see how it's coming along. Well, I've got those in the oven, and I meant to tell you that I put them on the middle shelf in my oven. So you want to do that 350, about 30 minutes. And while they're baking, I just wanted to show you the organic cocoa powder that I use that I mentioned. This is Rapunzel, is the brand name. It's cute. Organic cocoa powder, and it's really terrific. I love baking with this. And look for this in your grocery store. You may find it if they have it, you'll find it in the baking section. And if you can't find it, I'll put a link below where you can find it and learn more about it and whatnot. But I highly recommend it. Well, my cakes came out beautifully. They were in the oven exactly 30 minutes. I checked them with a toothpick. They were done. I took them out and let them cool. And now I'm going to flip them over onto a cooling rack. And all I'm going to do is just go around like this to make sure it's not sticking anywhere. And that's perfect. Looks good. Now I'm just going to do this. I let them cool, I can touch them, but I want to let them cool completely on the cooling rack before we move to the stage of icing them. Here we go. Wish me luck. Perfect. And now we'll just pull off this parchment paper. This is a gem. You never have any trouble if you line your baking sheets with parchment paper. Well, I will go ahead and get the other cakes out of their pans. I'll let them cool, and then we'll move on to making the icing. Well, my cakes have cooled completely, and we're ready to ice them. And I can't wait to show you how we're going to ice them, because I have a surprise in store. But before we get to that, I just want to mention that as I told you in the beginning, I used 3 9-inch cake pans. And the reason that I did that, given the amount of batter I had, was I wanted to get 3 layers. Because given that this is for Valentine's Day, I want to make it extra special, and I want to have 2 layers of icing in the middle. But you can also just divide the batter between 2 9-inch cake pans, and that'll be fine. And then you'd get a thicker cake, or a higher rise, whatever you want to say. So you can do that too, and I just wanted to mention that. Well, the icing couldn't be easier to make. It's basically 4½ cups of powdered sugar, a stick of butter, and a teaspoon of vanilla, and a little milk to thin it. that's it. And we're all going to do it all in one bowl. Now I'm using organic white sugar, that's powdered sugar. I think some people may call it icing sugar. And this is a holiday, it's Valentine's Day, so it's a special treat. So I'm using white sugar because I'm going to color the frosting. And I'm going to use some dehydrated berry powder, just berries that have been dried and then ground up into a powder. And this summer, when berries are in season, I'll definitely show you how to do that. But it's wonderful for coloring icing and not having to rely on food coloring. Now, that said, first I'm going to make the icing. Then I'm going to put a different amount of berry powder in 4 of the icings because we're going to make the cake real fancy. But I've got a shortcut in order to make it fancy. In my previous video, I shared with you that I bought a kit of Russian piping tips. And here's the little instructions that came with it. And I'll link to that video so that you can see it. But this is my first time. I've never used them before, but they're all washed and ready to go. And I'm going to put the icing into the piping bags in different colors, and I'm going to ice the cake, and then I'm going to pipe out these flowers and see how they look. And now with the piping kit come instructions, plus they have a website where you can go and watch videos to learn how to do this. And a few of the things I learned, a couple of tips, which I'll share with you, is that one, the icing should be pretty stiff. So I'm going to be very careful when we add the liquid. And then they say once you put it in the piping bag, you want to give a good firm push, but you don't want a lot. You want to keep the flowers kind of on the shorter side and then pull up quickly. We'll see how it goes. And I'll link below in the description to these piping tips if you want to find out more about them. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my teaspoon of vanilla. And then I'll add my first teaspoon or tablespoon or so of the liquid, and we'll get to blending the frosting. So I added a tablespoon of the milk to start, and we'll see how the consistency is. I'm going to start this on slow so that it doesn't fly everywhere, and the butter is softened, so hopefully this will go pretty quickly. Well, even on low, powdered sugar went flying. In any event, this took about a minute on the low speed, and then I popped it up maybe to the 2 or 3, and I added in about 5 tablespoons of milk. And I just want to show you the consistency. It's a pretty thick icing, and I'm thinking that I'm not going to put any more milk in. I think I'm just going to put a thin layer on the cake, but then I think this will be a good consistency to do the flowers. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 1/4 teaspoon of this dried berry powder, and I'm going to color this entire batch. I'm only going to do a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to make it a real light pink, and that's what I'll ice the cake with. And then what's left, I'll divide into these 4 bowls, and then I'll make each one slightly a different color. And that's what we'll use to pipe on the flowers. Well, so much for a 1/4 teaspoon of this berry powder. I wound up needing to use 2 teaspoonfuls to get a light pink color that I like. But it's a good thing I have a whole jar of this because I don't know how much it's going to take to get the darkness of the other colors for the flowers. And I just wanted to mention, if you don't have this homemade, you can probably find I've not seen dehydrated berries, but I've seen freeze-dried berries at my grocery store in little packages like in the snack section and or dried fruit somewhere over there. And you could buy that and use those too. Of course you can use food coloring, but I feel this is healthier. Maybe it helps offset some of the sugar in the icing. But in any event, this is the color that I'm going to use for the base color. It's just a light pale pink. And as I said, it took 2 teaspoons of the dehydrated berry powder. So I'm going to get the cake ready and we'll go ahead and ice the cake. Well, I've got my cake plate out and my cake stand, and it's a lovely one. It used to belong to my mom. And I don't know, maybe for those of you who might remember green stamps that you would get when you would buy groceries, and you'd fill the little book with the green stamps, and then you'd go to the green stamp store and be able to pick something out based on how many green stamps you had in your book. Well, that's how she got this cake stand. And now I see them in antique stores, which how cute is that? But in any event, I put down a little bit of parchment paper because I'll slide this out after we're all done icing. And this way it'll keep the cake plate clean. And now, if you have time, you can ice, put ice around, put the middle layers on, put the cake on, ice it very thinly, with what they call a crumb coat. And then put your second coat on, really make it look totally pristine. I'm going to do the best that I can because it's 4:45 and I want to surprise my husband with this, so I don't really have time to do a crumb coat. But I think it's going to come out beautiful nonetheless. So I'm going to put this first dollop of pink icing on here, and I'll start icing each layer and piling up the cake. Well, I've got the cake all iced up, and as I shared before, I put 2 teaspoons of the dried berry powder to get it this color, and then I decided I'm just going to go with 2 colors instead of 4, because when I did, so that was 2 teaspoons, I did 4 teaspoons here, because 3 teaspoons really wasn't a significant variation in color. So that was 4 teaspoons, and that got to be a nice color, and I think it's going to be a lovely contrast. And then this is a slightly darker color. And then I'll show you what I'm going to do when I put I'm going to actually put both icings in one piping bag. So some of the flowers will have like dark on the outside, some will have light on the outside with dark on the inside. I think it's really cute. And then this was about 5 teaspoons of the dehydrated powder. So it was getting kind of dark. So I said, okay, but it's still a beautiful contrast. So I said, okay, I'm just going to go with 2 colors. And then with the cake, then that makes a total of 3 colors. Now what I'm doing is I'm just gently and carefully pulling out the parchment paper, because I'll be putting flowers all along the rim. So I want to pull this out now. Well, I'm going to give this tip a try, and this is number 43, and it looks real fancy, so I'm anxious to try that. Now what I did was I just snipped the bag. I snipped it pretty high since these tips are so big. Now you can go ahead, and I've often just put the tip in like that and then started working, but since they do have the couplers, I'm going to go ahead and put the coupler on. And then all you do is take this part, put it in here, and then take this part and just screw it on like that, right over the plastic. Boom, you're done. It's secure, your tip is in, you're all ready to go. Now what I'm going to do is take the darker color, and I'm just going to spread it in my piping bag like this. Let me see if, maybe I'll bring you in closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Now I put down a yellow dish towel to help you see the contrast. What I'm going to do is just spread the darker icing on the inside of the bag here. I'm just going to keep going around like this, and then after I do that, I'm going to fill the center, with the lighter icing. So I'm just going to go all around like that, as you can see, and I'm just going to spread this on the outside and put some down into the tip and all around best I can. It doesn't need to be perfect. And now I'm just taking the lighter frosting, and I'm just using a small wooden spoon here and dolloping it right down into the middle. Easy to do. And that's that. Alrighty, now we're going to twist this, get this all ready to go, and we'll see how it works. Alrighty, now I've never done this before, so we're basically learning together. Well, let me give it a try, and I'm going to cover the whole, my plan is to cover the whole top of the cake and then do a rim all around the bottom. So I think I'll start right in the middle and work my way out. Maybe I should start on the side if it doesn't look too good. Well, let's be brave. Alrighty, here we go. Oh, you got to, it's firm. You got to give it a good push. Well, it collapsed a little in the middle, but it's not bad. Okay, now let's keep going. We've got to make sure that it adheres. And try to do this one a little bigger. Whoop! That's interesting. Okay, this is sort of an interesting flower, but let's give it another try. I think I got to squeeze even harder. Well, I decided that tip, let's see, which number was this? Was it 43? That's too challenging. I'm starting lower and with a much bigger hole. Alrighty, let's go now and see how we do with this one. Boop! Boop! Oh, it's cute. There we go. I just smoothed out that other one that wasn't too fantastic. It's cute. You have to, this is the type of thing you really need to practice. They show it, makes it look very easy in the video. But this is real world. Oh, and you may be wondering how, just so in case you go through this, I simply just removed the coupler ring, I unscrewed it, and then I just transferred the whole bag to another pastry bag. So I've got two, just one inside the other. And when I took off the coupler ring, I was able to pull out the one tip and put in a different one, just so to save all the icing and everything. Alrighty, here we go. Boop. Boop. It is fun. It just definitely takes practice. You've got to press firmly, very firmly to make, that one didn't come too good, very firmly to get the icing to come out, and then you have to pull up like quickly yet gently. This is an art. Well, I'm just going to keep going and try to do as much of the top of the cake as I can. Well, this is all I'm going to do because I'm out of icing. But I want to share a few tips because this was an interesting learning experience for me. Number one, I found my plan to sort of do the two-tone didn't go well. I think next time I'll use the coupler that has the 3 openings and put 3 colors of icing in there in different bags. I think that might go better. But secondly, something that I found very interesting about this is the icing needs to be really thick in order to get it to keep the shape and look right. I shouldn't say really thick, but thick enough to really hold the shape and yet at the same time be able to squeeze it through the tip. And what I'm going to guess, because I'm going to experiment a lot with this, and we'll do this a couple of times, more till we get really good at it, us together working through this. I would imagine that with the really complicated tips, that the icing might need to be a little bit smoother. And then with the big tips, you're going to need a little thicker icing. I'm just guessing that because I struggled trying to get my icing's pretty thick, and I struggled with trying to get it through the very delicate tip with a lot of markings. So that's interesting. So we're going to experiment. We'll try, over the various holidays, maybe for St. Patrick's Day, we'll try a green cake. And I think that it's very interesting. I really like it. It is a lot of fun, and it's fun seeing the shapes come out, and I really enjoy it. And I think my husband is going to be very pleased when I present this to him. So that's all that matters in the end. If you'd like to learn more about these Russian piping tips, be sure to subscribe to my channel and then click on this video over here where I unbox them. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless, and happy Valentine's Day.